He stood in front of her mirror, watching her crystalline skin shift from its normal clear state to a light blue of nervousness. Today was her first day at Galactic Research Station 7, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She straightened her science uniform and checked her data pad one more time. "Calm down," she told herself. "You are a Luminar. We are the most advanced species in the known galaxy. This is just a simple research assignment." But it wasn't just any research assignment. She would be studying humans, those strange beings from a small planet called Earth. Her people considered humans to be primitive, but somehow they had managed to join the Galactic Alliance despite their emotional nature and illogical behavior. The transport tube dropped her off at level 3 of the station, where the research labs were located. Hee's skin sparkled under the bright station lights as she walked down the corridor, her steps quick and precise. She had memorized the station layout, of course. Luminars never got lost. "Research Lab 7. She read the sign. Perfect. Inside, several other researchers were already working. Most were Luminars like her, their crystalline bodies glowing with the soft white light of concentration. A few other alien species worked at different stations, but He noticed there were no humans in the lab. That made sense. Humans weren't known for their scientific abilities. Hamnul, her supervisor, approached with the typical Luminar greeting, a slight tilt of the head that caused light to reflect off their crystalline form in a specific pattern. "He, welcome to Research Lab 7, Hamnul said. "Your station is ready. You will be studying human emotional responses and their impact on decision-making processes. Try to understand why they persist in using such inefficient methods." "Yes, senior researcher," He replied. "I have reviewed all existing data on humans. Their reliance on emotions seems highly impractical." Hamnul's skin flickered with approval, a brief flash of gold. "Good. You will observe them in their daily tasks around the station. Remember, minimal interaction. We don't want to contaminate the research." He nodded and headed to her workspace. She had just settled in when the station's alert system activated. "Warning: minor gravitational fluctuation in Sector 4. Maintenance team required." She watched as several researchers paused their work to observe the humans' response through the lab's monitoring systems. This would be her first chance to see humans in action. The maintenance team arrived quickly. He leaned forward, her skin shifting to the green of scientific curiosity. But as she watched, her curiosity turned to confusion. The humans weren't following any logical procedure. They were laughing. In the middle of a repair. "I need to observe this closer," she decided, standing up from her station. Hamnul noticed her movement. "He, remember, minimal interaction." "Of course, senior researcher. I will maintain proper distance." He left the lab and headed toward Sector 4. The corridor was busy with various species moving about their daily tasks. She was so focused on reaching her destination that she didn't notice someone coming around the corner. The collision was unavoidable. He felt herself falling backward, her data pad slipping from her hands. Her logical mind quickly calculated the impact trajectory. She would land in approximately 0.3 seconds. But the impact never came. Strong hands caught her, steadying her body. He found herself looking up into the most unusual eyes she had ever seen. They were dark brown, and they seemed to sparkle. Was that the right word? "Whoa there, are you okay?" The voice belonged to a human male in a security uniform. His name tag read Taiho. He was still holding her arms, and his face wore an expression that Hee's research identified as the smile. To her horror, she felt her crystalline skin responding without her permission. The clear surface began shifting to a deep purple, the color of attraction. She had read about this response, but had never experienced it herself. I am functional," she managed to say, trying to step back, but her usually graceful movements seemed to have malfunctioned as well. The human, Tahoe, bent down and picked up her data pad. "Here you go. No harm done." He handed it to her, and their fingers brushed briefly. Doohie's skin flashed with sparkles of silver, a response she didn't even know she was capable of. "Your skin is beautiful," Taiho said. "I've worked with luminars before, but I've never seen colors like that." Doohie felt her scientific training slipping away. She should be observing, taking notes, maintaining emotional distance. Instead, she was standing there, her skin betraying every emotion she wasn't supposed to have. Thank you. I must return to my research." She clutched her data pad to her chest. "Of course," Taiho said, still smiling. "But hey, if you're researching humans, feel free to ask me anything. I'm usually at the security station on level 2, or in the hydroponics bay during off hours. I help Jai-1 with the plants." "Plants? You communicate with vegetation?" Doohie couldn't help asking. Taiho laughed, and the sound did strange things to her color patterns. "Something like that. See you around, researcher." "Doohie," she supplied, then immediately regretted giving her name. "Doohie," he repeated, and somehow her name sounded different when he said it. "Nice to meet you." She watched him walk away, her skin finally settling back to its clear state. With shaking hands, she opened her data pad and began to write. Research log, Day 1. First contact with human subject has produced unexpected results. Further study is clearly necessary. Subject displays unusual ability to affect luminar physiological responses. Note, must research meaning of talking to plants. Additional note, purple skin response requires immediate investigation. As she walked back to the lab, Doohie realized that her people's understanding of humans might be completely wrong. They weren't simple at all. They were confusing, illogical, and somehow fascinating. Her skin betrayed her again, shifting to the purple of attraction mixed with the green of scientific curiosity. This research assignment was going to be much more complicated than she had anticipated. 3 days had passed since Doohie's first meeting with Taiho, and her research was not going as planned. She sat at her desk in Research Lab 7, staring at her data pad. Her skin kept shifting between the green of scientific focus and the purple of attraction. "This is highly irregular," she muttered to herself as she wrote in her research log. Research log, Day 4. Human subject continues to display behaviors that do not match any known patterns. Today I observed him in the hydroponics bay. He spent 47 minutes talking to the plants while maintaining a facial expression humans call a smile. When asked about this behavior, he claimed plants grow better when you are nice to them. This requires further investigation. Doohie looked at her previous entries from the past few days. Day 2. Subject solved a complex mechanical problem in the cargo bay by hitting the machine and calling it Buddy. The machine started working again. This defies all logical explanation. Day 3. Subject demonstrated unusual problem-solving abilities during security drill. When asked about his method, he said he used his gut feeling. I had to explain that humans do not have external digestive organs. He laughed. My skin turned purple again. She closed her eyes and tried to focus. This was supposed to be a simple research assignment. Watch the humans, document their primitive behaviors, and write a report about why logical thinking was superior. Instead, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. The lab door opened, and G1, the human botanist, walked in. She was carrying a small plant in a pot and heading toward Doohie's station. "Good morning, Doohie," Jai-1 said cheerfully. "Taiho mentioned you were interested in our plant-talking research. I brought you something." Doohie's skin flickered with surprise. "Plant-talking research? You mean this is an actual scientific study?" Jai-1 placed the small pot on Doohie's desk. Inside was a tiny green plant with delicate purple flowers. "This is a hybrid Earth Centaurian violet. Try talking to it for a week and record its growth. Then compare it to this one." She placed a second pot next to the first. "This one you treat with silence. Same amount of water, same light, but no talking." This is not a proper scientific method. He protested, but her hands were already reaching for her data pad to start a new research log. Sometimes the best discoveries come from trying things that don't seem logical at first, Jai once said with a wink. Oh, and Taeho asked me to give you this. She handed Doohee a small piece of paper, actual paper, with writing on it. Doohee's skin shifted rapidly through several colors as she read the message. Movie night in Recreation Room 3 tonight at 1900 hours. Classic Earth Sci-Fi. Come see how wrong we got aliens in the old days. Taeho. That is not proper research protocol, Doohee said, but her skin was already turning a brilliant shade of purple. Jaewon laughed. You know, for someone who's supposed to be studying humans, you're doing a pretty good job of acting like one. After Jaewon left, Doohee stared at the two plants and the note. The logical thing would be to focus on her official research. Instead, she found herself leaning closer to the flowering plant. Hello, she said, feeling ridiculous. I am Doohee, a luminar researcher. I will be monitoring your growth patterns. The plant, of course, didn't respond. But something about talking to it felt nice. Was that the right word? Doohee added it to her growing list of confusing human concepts she needed to investigate. Later that day, she observed Taeho during his security rounds. He handled 3 different situations, and none of his solutions followed any protocol she could understand. He helped a lost child find their parent by making funny faces to stop their crying. He fixed a stuck door by telling jokes to the nervous people trapped inside while he worked. He solved a dispute between 2 merchants by getting them to laugh at a story about his own shopping mistakes. How do you know what to do in each situation? Doohee asked him afterward, her data pad ready to record his response. Taeho thought for a moment. I just try to imagine how the other person feels, then do what feels right. Feels right. Doohee's skin swirled with confusion. But where is your decision matrix? Your logical framework? Sometimes the heart is smarter than the head, he said, then grinned. Speaking of which, are you coming to movie night? Doohee's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a mix of purple and blue. That would not be proper research protocol. Ah, but how can you study humans if you never see how we have fun? His eyes had that sparkle again. Besides, I save you a good seat. Front row. Best view of all the horrible alien costumes from old Earth movies. Against all logical judgment, Doohee found herself saying, I will attend. For research purposes only. Of course, Taeho said, still grinning. Purely scientific. That evening, as Doohee prepared to leave the lab, she made one final entry in her research log. Day 4, Evening Edition. Preparing to observe human recreational activity called Movie Night. Hypothesis. Will provide insight into human entertainment preferences and social bonding rituals. Note. Purple skin response continues. Unable to control it. Second note. Spoke to plant as suggested. Feel strangely positive about this. Third note. Subject smile appears to have unusual effects on logical thinking abilities. This requires extensive further study. She looked at the 2 plants on her desk. Without really thinking about it, she leaned down and whispered, Good night. Grow well. As she walked to Recreation Room 3, Doohee realized she was experiencing what humans called excitement. Her skin was sparkling with tiny dots of silver and gold, a pattern she had never seen before. The logical part of her mind told her to return to her quarters and review her research notes. Instead, she found herself walking faster, wondering what Earth movies got wrong about aliens, and most confusingly, looking forward to seeing Taeho's smile again. This is not proper scientific behavior, she told herself. But for the first time in her life, she didn't care about being proper. She wanted to understand why humans did things the way they did, why they laughed and told stories and talked to plants, why Taeho's smile made her skin change colors she didn't know she had. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to learn from their illogical ways after all. The movie night had changed everything. Doogie sat in Research Lab 7, trying to focus on her work, but her mind kept going back to that evening. She had learned so many new things. That humans once imagined aliens as green creatures with huge eyes, that they could laugh at their own mistakes, and that sitting next to Taiho in a dark room made her skin glow like a rainbow. Doogie, please explain this. Hey Newell's voice interrupted her thoughts. The senior researcher stood in front of her desk, holding a datapad. Doogie's skin turned pale blue with worry when she saw her own research logs on the screen. Senior researcher, I can explain. I have been conducting close observation of human behavior patterns. You have been watching Earth entertainment videos and talking to plants. Hey Newell's crystalline form flickered with disapproval. This is not proper research methodology. But the plant that I talked to grew 15% faster than the silent one, Doogie said, pointing to the two violet plants on her desk. The one she had been talking to was indeed bigger and had more flowers. That is not possible. Plants do not respond to verbal communication. Hey Newell moved closer to examine the plants. There must be some error in your methodology. Just then, Taiho walked into the lab. He was carrying a small package and smiling, as usual. Doogie's skin immediately turned purple with silver sparkles, which made Hey Newell's disapproval flicker even stronger. Hey, Doogie, I brought you something for your plant experiment. Taiho stopped when he noticed Hey Newell. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. This is a research facility, not a social gathering place. Hey Newell said coldly. Please leave. Taiho's smile didn't fade, but it changed slightly. Doogie was getting better at reading human expressions, and she could tell this was what they called a determined look. Actually, I'm here on official business, he said, pulling out his security badge. We're doing a station-wide safety check, part of the new cultural exchange program. Each department gets visited by members of different species to spot potential safety issues others might miss. Doogie watched in amazement as Taiho smoothly turned his social visit into a professional one. Hey Newell couldn't argue with official station business, even if she wanted to. Very well. Proceed with your inspection. Hey Newell turned back to Doogie. We will continue our discussion later. After Hey Newell left, Taiho placed the small package on Doogie's desk. Your talking plant looked hungry, he whispered with a wink. Inside the package was a small bottle of plant nutrients. Doogie's skin sparkled with gratitude and something else she couldn't quite name. That was not a real safety inspection, she said quietly. No, but it was worth it to see the look on her face. Taiho grinned. Sometimes humans bend the rules a little if it's for a good reason. That is highly illogical, Doogie said, but she was already opening the bottle to feed her plants. Speaking of illogical, want to hear something crazy? The station's artificial gravity has been acting weird lately. The maintenance team can't figure out why. Doogie looked up from her plants. Weird how? Small fluctuations in different sections. Nothing dangerous yet, but, he shrugged. Engineers say all the readings look normal, but something feels off. Feels off. Doogie's skin swirled with curiosity. You are using emotional data to analyze a mechanical problem. Sometimes your gut knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. Before Doogie could argue about the impossibility of digestive organs having knowledge, the station's alert system activated. Warning. Major gravitational anomaly detected. All personnel prepare for possible gravity fluctuations. The warning had barely finished when the gravity in the lab suddenly reversed. Everything that wasn't secured flew toward the ceiling, including Doogie and Taiho. Doogie's logical mind immediately began calculating vectors and forces, trying to find a solution. But her calculations were interrupted by Taiho grabbing her hand and pulling her toward him. Hold on, he shouted, using his free hand to grab a sturdy pipe that ran along the wall. I've got you. The gravity shifted again, this time pushing everything sideways. Laboratory equipment crashed around them. Doogie's precious plants went flying, but Taiho somehow managed to catch one pot with his foot while still holding onto her and the pipe. "This defies several laws of physics," Doobie said, her skin a chaotic mix of colors. "Yeah. Wait till you see how we fix it." Tahoe looked at the main control panel across the room, which was now sideways from their perspective. "See that red button? The one that says Emergency Override. We cannot reach it in these conditions. The gravitational variations make it impossible to." "Do you trust me?" Tahoe asked suddenly. Doobie's skin cycled through every color she knew. Trust was not a scientific concept. It was an emotional one. The logical answer was no. "Yes," she said instead. Tahoe grinned. "Good, because this is going to be really, really illogical." He started swinging them back and forth, using the shifting gravity to build momentum. Doobie realized what he was planning just before he did it. "This is not possible," she shouted as he let go of the pipe, timing it perfectly with a gravity shift to launch them toward the control panel. "Impossible is just another word for it hasn't been done yet," Tahoe called back, somehow laughing despite the danger. They flew across the room, bouncing off walls as the gravity kept changing. Just before they reached the panel, Tahoe spun them around so his back would hit first, protecting Doobie from the impact. "Hit the button," he yelled. Doobie stretched out her arm and slammed her hand down on the emergency override. The gravity immediately stabilized, dropping everything and everyone back to the floor. They landed in a heap, Tahoe cushioning her fall. Doobie's skin was flashing so many colors she looked like a light show. "That was the most illogical, dangerous, impossible thing I have ever done," she said, still lying on top of him. "But it worked," Tahoe said, grinning up at her. "And you have to admit it was kind of fun." Doobie realized she was still holding onto him, and her skin turned deep purple. She quickly stood up, trying to regain her composure. "Are you both all right?" Jaewon rushed into the lab, followed by Hae Newell and several other researchers. "We're fine," Tahoe said, standing up. He walked over to where he'd somehow kept Doobie's talking plant safe. "And look, even the plant survived." Hae Newell looked at the chaos in the lab, then at Doobie's still purple skin, then at the plant in Tahoe's hands. "This situation requires a full report. Doobie, you will explain everything." Doobie straightened her uniform and picked up her data pad, which had somehow survived the gravity chaos. She began to write. "Research log, emergency report. Today I learned that impossible things can become possible when approached with both logic and emotion. Also, plants are surprisingly resilient when caught by human feet during gravitational anomalies. Further research is definitely required." She looked up to see Tahoe carefully placing her plant back on her desk. He was still smiling, and for the first time, Doobie didn't try to stop her skin from turning purple. Some things, she was learning, were more important than being logical. 1 week had passed since the gravity incident, and Doobie sat in her quarters staring at her final research report. Her talking plant sat next to her data pad, now twice the size of its silent partner. The words on her screen didn't make sense anymore, even though they followed perfect luminar logic. "This is incorrect," she said to her plant, a habit she had stopped trying to fight. "How can I write that humans are primitive when they keep proving otherwise?" The station's annual cultural exchange event was starting tomorrow. All species would present their achievements and share their knowledge. The Luminars always used this event to show their superior technology and logical thinking. Doobie had been chosen to present her research on human behavior. Her data pad showed a message from Tahoe. "Good luck with your presentation tomorrow. Remember, sometimes the best discoveries happen by accident." Doobie's skin turned a new color, a soft gold with streaks of purple. She had stopped trying to control her color changes around Tahoe. It seemed illogical to fight something that felt so natural. The next morning, Doobie walked into the main presentation hall. Many species had gathered there, including a large group of luminars. She saw Tahoe and Jaewon sitting together in the middle rows. Her plants, both the talking and silent ones, were part of her presentation materials. Hanul stepped forward to introduce her. Today, junior researcher Dewey will present her findings on human decision-making processes and their reliance on emotional responses rather than logic. Dewey walked to the center of the stage. Her skin was calm and clear as she began speaking. Fellow researchers, I stand before you today to share my observations about humans. She gestured to her two plants. These plants were part of an experiment. One was given logical scientific care. The other received the same care, but with an addition. I talked to it, following human practices. Murmurs spread through the luminar section of the audience. Dewey continued, her voice growing stronger. The plant I spoke to grew faster and stronger than its silent partner. At first, I thought this was a mistake. It seemed impossible. But then I realized something. Impossible things happen around humans all the time. She activated the display screen behind her, showing recordings from the gravity incident. When our logical systems failed, a human's gut feeling saved us. When our careful calculation showed no solution, human creativity found a way. Her skin began to shift colors as she spoke, but she didn't try to hide it anymore. We Luminars pride ourselves on being the most advanced species in the galaxy. We believe our logical thinking makes us superior. But what if we're wrong? What if there's more than one way to be advanced? The audience was completely silent now. Dewey could see Hanul's disapproving flickers, but she also saw Taiho's encouraging smile. Humans talk to plants, and the plants grow better. They trust their feelings, and they solve problems we can't. They laugh in the face of danger, and somehow that helps them think more clearly. They break rules when the rules don't make sense, and they create better solutions. She touched her talking plant gently. Look at this plant. It grew stronger not because of better science, but because it received something we Luminars don't understand. Emotional energy, care, love. The word love made her skin burst into a symphony of colors. Some older Luminars turned away, embarrassed by such an emotional display. We call humans primitive because they use emotions. But emotions aren't primitive. They're powerful. They're another kind of intelligence, one that we've ignored because we can't measure it in our laboratories. Dewey looked directly at Taiho as she continued. In my time studying humans, I've learned that logic alone isn't enough. The universe is too big, too complex for just one way of thinking. Sometimes you need to trust your heart, or as humans say, your gut, even when your mind doesn't understand why. She straightened her back and made her final point. My research conclusion is this. We Luminars need to learn from humans as much as they need to learn from us. We need their creativity, their emotional intelligence, their ability to see possibilities where we see only problems. The presentation hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jai-1 started clapping. Taiho joined in, then other humans, then members of other species. Even some younger Luminars began flickering their approval. Hanul stepped forward, her crystalline form rigid with disapproval. This is not the conclusion we expected, Dewey. No, Dewey agreed, her skin glowing with confidence. It's better. It's true. After the presentation, Dewey stood in the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Her skin was finally settling back to its normal clear state after all the excitement. That was quite a speech. Taiho's voice came from behind her. I don't think I'd ever seen a Luminar talk about emotions like that. Dewey turned to face him. I almost didn't. It wasn't logical. But it was right. He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the stars. Your skin is doing that purple thing again. I know, she said softly. I stopped trying to control it. Good. Taiho smiled. Because I like it. Dewey opened her data pad and made one final research entry. Final research log. Today I presented what I learned about humans, but really, I presented what I learned about myself. Logic and emotion aren't enemies. They're two parts of the same universe, like stars and the space between them. We need both to see the whole picture. She looked up at Taiho, her skin glowing with all the colors she had discovered since meeting him. "I've requested a permanent position on the station," she said, "to continue my research." "Research, huh?" Taiho grinned. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Of course," Doohy said, her skin sparkling with silver and gold. "I need to conduct many more experiments about humans and their strange ways. It's only logical." Taiho laughed and took her hand. Together, they watched the stars, while in the research lab, a small plant that had been talked to continued to grow, proving that sometimes the most illogical things made the most sense after all.